For the past 8 weeks, I have worked tirelessly on my Warhammer 40K faction. I've consistently put in more hours than I ever have over a 2-month period, and the end goal is in sight. I have 1 week left to finish my Drakari army before my game with my friend Jay, and while I have invested the time, turns out armies take even longer to finish than I had anticipated. I guess 84 models is a lot to paint nicely. That doesn't matter though, I will still keep attacking this backlog while there is life left in these little chicken tendies. Let's get on to finishing this army.
Today we're working on some scourges, assembled and base coated by my friend Dan the Man. Unfortunately, I forgot to mention that I wanted to use different heads. So, step 1 is ripping off these vanilla heads to replace them with my chrome domes. With the heads removed, I can get a pilot hole started with my X-Acto knife and then drill them out to fit some pins so I can hold these heads in some cork. With those heads attached to cork, I'm now able to apply my Molotov chrome. I find this paint is a lot easier to apply with an airbrush as long as you put it on nice and thickly. I also like to do it at this stage to give the ink plenty of time to set up, 24 hours at a minimum. After even 2 or 3 hours of drying, if you accidentally get your finger in this paint, it'll totally mat it and kill the shine. Now we can move on to painting the scourges, and they were base coated with a Vallejo primer that's a little bit darker than my typical base coat, so I started the procedure by essentially doing a pretty heavy zenithal highlight with the airbrush with my normal base coating paint, and this was super fast, so it wasn't an inconvenience at all. With that first layer of khaki down, I can now apply my first highlight with a lighter off-white tan color.
Because you guys have seen the beginning stages of my Drakari so many times, I'm going to answer more of your awesome questions you asked last week as opposed to re-describing this process. Do you think it was worth it? Do you think it would have looked better if you took more time to paint the army? No, I don't think it would have looked a lot better if I took more time to paint the army. I think I'm kind of at a comfortable sweet spot for how much effort to put into my army painting models. Because some people are new to the channel because of this whole Dark Eldar series, they might not know that I've already painted 3 armies before this: Blood Angels, Greyjoy, and also Soulblight Gravelords. I'm kind of narrowing it in on like what I want my army figure to look like.
Next, with the white armor, I can take Tamiya flat and apply my final, brightest highlight to the most important areas: the shoulders, the knees, the thigh plates, and certain portions of the wings that I've been emphasizing. With all the highlights added in, I can now add in my orangish, brownish shadow. I also use the ink to increase the contrast on the wings because I will be adding a contrast paint to them, and any contrast that I have on the surface now will show up once that transparent product is used. Hopefully. With the white armor shaping up, I decided to move over to the military green parts of the model. Taking a page out of Jay's book for speed painting, instead of using normal acrylic paint to base coat these things, I used Army Painter Speed Paint. So step 1 is figuring out how to replicate the color that I use in my models with these paints. And I found for my color, a 50-50 mix of Camo Cloak and Desolate Brown did a really good job. I also mixed in some Speed Paint Medium to dilute the color a little bit. Applying this paint is great right now because a lot of the areas that neighbor this green spot are black, and they'll just get covered up with a different speed paint later on, totally masking any of these mistakes.
Allow me a brief moment to shout out my web store, Miniac.co, where you can find a lot of cool hobby goodness, like a limited edition bus called the Cheerleader. There are about 100 left of this scrappy teen spirit-filled hooligan, about a quarter of the original 400 that I had a month ago when I first released the model, and I'm not making any more, so get it while the getting is good. This model is designed for display painters to be able to express their creativity. Where there could be sculpted detail, I left flat for you to freehand and interpret as you see fit for the character. I've already seen awesome versions of the Cheerleader on the internet, and I can't wait to see more. Keep sending them my way. If busts or cheerleaders aren't your thing, I also have 75mm display models. Each 75mm display model on my website has a respective masterclass course that not only teaches you how to paint the model like you see in the box art, but it also teaches you all the tools and techniques necessary for accomplishing it. It is a full educational experience where the things you learn you can take forward into your miniature painting, and hopefully it'll impact your models for years to come. You can also find some of my hobby tools over at Miniac.co, like my cutting mat that's double-sided with an imperial grid on one side and a metric on another, with unique art on both sides, 3mm thick and self-healing. And I also have the brush coffin for you to store your miniature painting tools, most notably your brushes. The box is fully metal with 2 foam layers inside, and you can mix and match the colors red and black to your heart's content. That's it for now. Back to painting my scourges. This is a great question. What do you do if you can't find a color scheme? I have a whole video about picking your scheme for a Warhammer army that I'll link in the top right-hand corner and also down below. But to summarize, there's a lot of different ways. You can start with your favorite color and kind of build a scheme around that. And really, people need to think about how a scheme isn't just a collection of colors, it's also the ratio of colors. Is 80% of my model going to be blue and 10% tan and 10% red? Is it going to be 80% red and 10% blue? You know, so how you break down a model like that is also a very important part of a scheme. Another really simple way, if you're a fan of minerals, you can just look at a mineral, and oftentimes a really cool stone will have a color scheme just on it. You can also look at other art, like in my case, metal albums, and they'll have a color scheme that you can kind of just strip off and apply to your models. But don't forget about the ratios.
After the green parts were all dry, it kind of looked splotchy and not dark enough. So I mixed some water into that same ratio to loosen it a bit and applied it. I think a lot of products like this are just a little bit too viscous and they don't settle nicely and run down to the recesses and instead pool in awkward areas. So by loosening it with some water, it tends to do that a little bit better.
When I first got started playing Dark Eldar back with, I think, the 4th edition of Warhammer 40K, I remember really being super excited and wanting to, I guess, expend that excitement somewhere. And if the models aren't fully assembled and painted, I can't really play a game yet. And so I did that by reading this book cover to cover. And the one thing that stuck out in my mind so much is the backstory for how the scourges come to be. The wings are not natural. They get grafted on and they get like stabilized by like a ton of combat drugs and things like that. And in order to figure out who gets to be a scourge, they have to fly to the top of this roost. And on the way to the top, there are a bunch of airborne monsters trying to kill them. And whoever doesn't make it up there with their newly grafted on wings perishes and falls to the bottom to never return ever again. But if you make it, then you can join a scourge squad and be like one of these guys. And the best part about the backstory of the scourges is that it is modeled on the scourges themselves. You can see the combat drugs running to their wings, these giant vials of God knows what on there as well. This kind of thing gets me geeking so hard when the lore is cool. You can see it modeled on the characters as well. I love this.
With all the major colors down, I hit the model with a gloss varnish to, you guessed it, do another oil wash. The last time I did this on my Dark Eldar, it was a minor catastrophe, but I'm pretty sure I know why it happened. More on that later. While I wait for the varnish to set up, I'm just gonna work on the bases a little bit because all the airbrush steps are done, so we shouldn't get any spillage onto the base. First step, hitting it with a base coat of Vallejo Game Color Earth.
Another thing that I can do while the varnish sets up is super glue magnets to the bottom of my entire army. Often this is the sort of thing that I would leave to do right before leaving for Adepticon and end up rushing and being really stressed out. But if I do this now, days before I have to leave, then I can just put them in the case and ready to go. My secret to get super glue to work with magnets on the bottom of a base is just to use a lot of it. Just use a lot. Boom. Done. Magnets in all the bases. I'm also listening to Scardcast break down all of the Drakari units, so I have some chance of being competitive against Jay. And also, I got a trick up my sleeve that you're going to see later in the video that may help me quite a bit.
With the varnish fully set up, it's time to do the oil wash. Now, last time I did this, I mixed my oil wash in a container that had used oil washes previously, and I think some of the old paint mixed with the new paint, causing it to cure a lot faster. So this time, I'm gonna use a brand spanking new dish to mix my oil wash. I'm aiming for a mixture kind of more on the thicker side. Like I've said in previous videos, I find that while this doesn't look as sexy as a nice thin oil wash, it tends to stick in the places you want it to stick more often. And both thick and thin oil washes clean off with mineral spirits pretty much the same, or at least they're supposed to. One last thing I did before heading out for the day was apply an enamel wash to the base to let that dry while I'm gone as well.
All right, it's the next day. Time to remove this oil wash, and I think we should do it together for the first time. Let's see if it sticks again. Please. Oh, yeah, baby. I can already tell. Yeah, you see that wing right there? That wing thing? Yeah, that came right off. No mineral spirits needed. A nice little brown thin line in those recesses. Mwah!
Admittedly, for this oil wash, I probably thinned it a little bit too much while I was applying it, and I didn't wait long enough. It still feels a little bit too fragile. There's definitely a learning curve to getting good with oil washes. Also, to speed up this procedure, they do sell things that increases the curing time of oil paints. But I haven't messed with that yet, but I'm looking forward to in the future.
What did you build your army around? Like play style or ability or something else? I, long time ago when I was in college, loved to read on this forum called the darkcity.net. And there was a person on that forum who wrote really awesome battle reports. Do you ever remember that? Reading battle reports as still images in like a forum or a magazine? Anyways, it was a Dark Eldar player that ran a bunch of Reaver jet bikes, like way more than the normal list. And he took that constraint and really flipped it on its head and played differently. And it was always so cool to see how he worked inside of that creative limit he set for himself. And that's how I play all of my games. I never like to do the standard default thing that like the internet agrees upon. Just like with my painting, I want to creatively interpret how to play Dark Eldar as well, and play games in general. I don't seek out things that I know are bad for a fact just to see if I can do well with them, but I'm always going to prefer a more unique approach to playing something than going with a more cookie cutter approach. So, inspired by that guy on the forum, I have 18 Reavers in my army that I also want to try to figure out how to use in this new edition of Warhammer that aren't painted up yet. Probably the biggest chunk of my army still left unpainted. What would, in your world, be the proper centerpiece for Dark Eldar? Well, the one that I've chosen and the one that I like the most is the Razor Wing Jet Fighter. That vehicle is so much more of a Dark Eldar vehicle than the Raiders and Ravagers. I don't know why. It looks like a blade just slicing through the sky at like breakneck speeds. I love that ship so much, and that's why I chose for the centerpiece of this army.
With that matte varnish down, I'll now work on the black, which I do with Grim Black from Army Painter's Speed Paint line. I'll add various parts of the guns, their skin suit, and most notably different on these guys, their wings. I chose to kit out my unit entirely with the feathered wings, because that felt more appropriate for the desert landscape. Now that the black is done, I'll do my white highlights, and I'll bust out a bright white, a khaki, and a darker tan color. And mostly for my edge highlights, I'll be using the white. But with the other colors, I'm able to fix up mistakes that were caused by the oil wash, where I might have missed doing the cleanup, or if the black contrast paint leaked down someone's leg onto some armor panels and I have to redo them. It's just nice to have all three colors out to fix those problems while I'm also highlighting.
How do you document the steps you complete for the build and painting so that in 6 months or a year, you're able to add a new element to the army while maintaining consistency? Honestly, I haven't really been notating a whole lot. I kind of keep this big pile of paint on my desk that I use for all of my Dark Eldar, so I'm using consistent khakis and creams and browns and stuff like that. But before I started doing this, only a couple of weeks ago, I kind of just guessed each time, and it seems to be working out okay. My bases are a little inconsistent because I didn't really understand how to do my bases early on, but now that I figured that out, I'm going to go back and fix the rest. Honestly, colors like tan and black don't have a lot of color in them anyways, so if you kind of fib the numbers a little bit, it doesn't really matter too much.
Now let's move on to the guns, which are kind of an important part of the Scourges. They're so big, they're so massive, they're right in the middle of the model, and I kind of feel like the contrast paint just didn't do them justice. They're a little bit splotchy. So with the green color that I normally use for the guns, mixed with a little bit of off-white yellow to match the color that those speed paints produced, I'll apply a highlight to the topmost details on the gun. And I'll also use that color to edge highlight the lower details. Checking out a before and after, I think this step cleans up a lot of that aforementioned splotchiness and looks pretty good.
This is a great question. What do you do if you've been set on a color scheme through the whole army, but you get to a unit that you think would look better if it was the complete opposite? I kind of experienced that with my mandrakes. They're a totally different look than the rest of my army, but not really. And the way that I thought about that was that, you know how color schemes have a spot color, like a bright and vibrant color that's very small on the model? I kind of feel like an entire army is a display model, and that individual units in that army are like the individual components of a display model. And so one of those units can be a spot color unit, like my mandrakes, super orange and yellow with teal hair, and they just look kind of like gaudy. But in the context of my army, which is normally a bunch of khakis and stuff like that, they look really good, you know? Those colors are there in the other models, teals and oranges and yellows, but in very small quantities. But then when next to that unit with the big demon guys, it looks good, it looks right. Oh. No. That's for the OnlyFans. God damn it, why does this keep happening?
For the combat drugs, I'll start with a base coat of a darker turquoise, and then highlight with teal, and then a final highlight of teal with some white and yellow mixed in. We're making some great time on these scourges, so let's finish them off strong. The way that I painted them, they don't have large areas of silver, so my very brief silver step is just base coating the very small details like the studs on their rib cages, on their feet, on their shins, on their thighs, all over. These details are so small, they don't require anything other than a nice bright silver layer of paint. Last up for the main models themselves is a little bit of skin tone, and there isn't much, just feet and the odd arm here that I start with a base coat of a Caucasian skin tone. Next up after that base coat is dry, we'll apply a blue wash. And I do that because all of the Coven guys in my army have kind of a sickly blue skin. And I kind of see scourges as adjoining forces of the Cabal aspect and the Coven aspect of Drakari. I imagine they probably got some help from homunculi to get these wings on, so it makes sense if their skin looks a little bit more sickly. With that wash dry, I apply a highlight with that exact same paint that I used the base coat with. And for feet, that's good enough. We'll call it done and move on to the heads. Finally, on to the heads, the last part of this model to get painted. And we'll start by painting the edge of this kind of thick visor with a dark brown paint. If you saw my last video, I'm painting the heads in the exact same way. With that shadow color down, I base coat it in khaki, hit it with a highlight or two, paint some of the bits and bobs on the sides of the helmet, and then we're done. Now we can attach it.
So I just got done listening to someone break down every single unit and rule for the Dark Eldar faction. And basically what I learned is half the things in my army are bad. Sometimes that can be a little frustrating, but I've been in this hobby for a long time, and something that far outweighs and outlives bad rules are just cool models and your appreciation for the amount of effort you put into them. You know, sometimes your army is doing well, it's on top of the game, and sometimes it isn't doing well. And that kind of just ebbs and flows, and you have no control over that. But what you have control over are the aesthetics of your army. So focus on that, not so much on its power level.
And last but certainly not least, we gotta finish up these bases with a bit of airbrushing, some static grass tufts, and a nice black base rim. Another 5-man unit from my army, done and dusted.
Have you had fun doing this project, and would you do it again if the opportunity came up? I'll definitely paint another Warhammer 40k army. I don't necessarily like to rush and do the same kind of miniature painting for like 8 weeks in a row. I like to break it up and do a little bit of variety, but absolutely, I'm probably gonna paint another 40k army, and I'm looking forward to painting some Sisters of Battle. I have a really cool scheme for them, and I'm excited to see what that looks like on an entire army.
And with that unit done, I had hours to go before I had to leave for Adepticon, so I smashed everything into a travel case with a mixture of magnets and also some poster tack for the bigger guys. And I was off to seal my 40k fate.
But I wasn't doing it alone. Remember that secret weapon that I mentioned earlier? I somehow convinced the one and only Sean, Jay's arch nemesis in Warhammer 40k, to be my strategic advisor during our game. Surely I can't lose now. Jay won the roll-off to go first on turn 1, which was a little frightening because I understand that lots of stuff dies in the first turn of 40k. But strangely, I walked away mostly unscathed. I lost most of a Mandrake unit and a Raider, but that was it. Sadly, I didn't clap back much harder, and turn 1 ended with Jay taking the lead in victory points.
Sean, how do you feel about my chances about winning this game?
It's the start of your turn too, right?
Yeah. Well, not yet. He has to charge and attack me still.
Okay. Things always look bleakest on not your turn.
Okay.
So We'll see.
There's
That's
hope.
how it always.
There's hope. Okay.
That hope was short-lived, unfortunately, as Jay kept accumulating more points than me each and every turn, but despite the battle feeling lost, I was still able to charge in my full 10-man unit of Incubi with Drazar into a unit of Grotesques and utterly annihilated them. Then Drazar had the extreme pleasure of slicing and dicing Jay's Archon to absolute bits. It felt amazing. Ultimately though, I lost the game, and that's okay, because it was fun to hang out with Jay, Nick, and Sean, and get back into 40K after over a decade of not having played it. I thought it was gonna be way worse and way more swingy than it actually was. There was definitely some back and forth, which is what I want out of a miniature war game, so I was pleasantly surprised to find it. At the end of all the blood, sweat, and tears, I didn't finish my army on time. I have 15 Reavers left that are only assembled and base coated, and my Raiders, which are likely halfway done. I truly put my all into painting this army these past 8 weeks, waking up early, working on weekends, because I truly didn't want to disappoint you guys. It feels great to have everyone enjoying my videos and encouraging me to keep going, and that was extremely helpful. And I wanted to do right by the 40K fans who might feel a little neglected when it comes to the content on my channel. The silver lining here is that I'm still gonna paint the rest of my army, just not every single week. There will still be one Drakari focused video on my channel a month until this army is fully complete. But I hope that despite the regular programming of the past 8 weeks changing, that you'd still tune in on Mondays to see what's going on here. It might not be 40K, and heck, it might not even be painting, but it will be focused on this beautiful and diverse hobby that you and I share, and it'll be something that I love and am excited to share with you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the journey so far. I am so excited to see this massive army finished, and if you need to catch up on all the hot Miniac 40K action, I'll link a playlist below and at the end of the video. Subscribe or die! And most importantly, don't forget to paint more minis!